Max Verstappen stands 9th in the championship, 60 points behind after 3 races. This is not a slump. This is a signal. The dominant force in Formula 1 is vulnerable for the first time in a decade. The energy around Red Bull is not confidence. It is calculation, and that calculation centers on one question. The RB22 is fundamentally misaligned with the 2026 regulations. The Ford-powered Red Bull powertrains unit arrived with a power deficit. The aero platform was built on assumptions that did not match the track. Max's gap to the front is around 1.0 seconds in qualifying. The championship math is already broken. There is a clause in Max's contract that could free him this summer. It triggers if he is not second or higher after Hungary. The question is not whether it exists, it is whether he will use it. Or, because if the people who built his titles are now at rivals, who is left to fix the RB22? Adrian Newey left Red Bull in May 2024, Jonathan Wheatley to Audi, Rob Marshall and Will Courtney to McLaren, Christian Horner ousted, Helmut Marko retired, 7 key figures gone in 18 months. When Gianpiero Lambiase, the voice in Max's helmet for 4 titles, announced his move to McLaren, the pattern became a warning. Lambiase was the calm in the storm, the translator between driver and machine. Losing him mid-contract creates instability no data can fix. McLaren hired the person who knows how Max thinks. Jos Verstappen's calm reaction was a signal. When Jos sounds quiet, the family has already run the numbers. What no broadcast covered is this: Red Bull lost the institutional memory that turned speed into championships. That's the chief designer, the strategist, the engineer who managed the driver's mind, all gone, all at rivals. If the RB22's problems are cultural, not just technical, then the next section is about whether a car can be saved when the minds that built it have moved on. The RB22 was built for a regulation change Red Bull thought they understood. They were wrong. The 2026 rules removed the MGUH, tripled electrical power to 470 horsepower, and replaced DRS with active aero. Red Bull's first in-house engine in 15 years arrived with a power deficit. When a car is fundamentally misaligned with the rules, the question is whether it can be fixed. The data tells the real story. Australia brought P6. China ended in a coolant DNF. Suzuka delivered P8. The RB22 is around 1.0 seconds off pole and worse in race trim. On it, credible sources suggest a 15 to 20 horsepower gap to Mercedes and Ferrari. The bigger problem is aerodynamic. Wind tunnel predictions did not match track reality. Tire degradation shows the RB22 managing rears differently than the Mercedes W16. What no broadcast covered is this: the problems are architecture issues, not setup tweaks. When power is down and aero assumptions were wrong, you cannot fix that with a weekend of tinkering. If the car cannot be competitive before summer break, then the next question is about contracts and clauses. Max Verstappen's contract runs through 2028, worth an estimated $275 million. On paper, he is locked in. In practice, a performance clause changes everything. If Max is not second or higher after Hungary, he is free to walk. Red Bull has never confirmed this publicly. That silence is the point. Mikes, teams do not hide escape routes unless someone might use them. The math is brutal. After 3 races, Max trails by 60 points. That is about 20 points lost per weekend. If that continues, the gap by summer break exceeds 200 points. Historical precedent shows how these clauses work. Hamilton, Alonso, and Vettel all had them. None waited until the trigger date to plan their next move. What no broadcast covered is this: racing with an exit strategy changes how a driver thinks. It affects risk-taking. It changes communication with a team that may not be your future. The clause is not just a legal detail, it is a psychological lever. If Max decides the RB22 cannot be fixed, then the next question is which team has built a home ready for him. McLaren did not just hire Lambiase. They hired the person who knows how Max thinks under pressure. Zak Brown and Andrea Stella have been assembling something quietly. Rob Marshall and Will Courtney are already in Woking. Now Lambiase joins as chief racing officer. McLaren is rebuilding Max's entire support system. That changes everything. The MCL40 struggled early with electrical issues causing double retirements, but Piastri's Suzuka podium showed promise. McLaren sits third in constructors. What the data shows is a development trajectory that could close the deficit if resources focus. The real question is whether McLaren can absorb a $60 million salary under the budget cap without sacrificing the development that would attract him. Andrea Stella has said Piastri will become a world champion in a McLaren. That can be true, and McLaren can still prepare for Max. Teams operate on multiple tracks, but here is what the paddock is not talking about. If McLaren signs Max, garage dynamics shift instantly. The collaborative culture must accommodate a #1 mandate, and Piastri is watching all of this unfold. Oscar Piastri led the 2025 championship for 189 days, won 7 of the first 15 races, and lost the title by 2 points. At Monza, McLaren asked him to give position to Norris. He complied. He never regained momentum. Baku brought a crash. Singapore saw contact that damaged his floor. Austin ended in a sprint crash. By Abu Dhabi, the math was done. Australian Senator Matt Keane raised the issue formally, asking whether a British team treated an Australian driver fairly. That is political pressure. Piastri's contract reportedly runs at least through 2027. But that phrase in F1 contracts usually means performance options and escape routes. Credible sources suggest a clause tied to whether the team shows preference to Norris. What no broadcast covered is this: Piastri is not waiting passively. He is watching the next 6 races to see if McLaren's public praise matches private actions. His Suzuka podium proved he can deliver, but proof of speed is not proof of support. If Max becomes available, Piastri holds leverage. He can honor his contract or activate his own exit. The driver who lost a title by following orders now writes his own rules. If Max activates his clause, every driver under contract for 2027 freezes. Leclerc and Hamilton are locked at Ferrari. Russell and rookie Kimi Antonelli share Mercedes, with Antonelli leading on 72 points after wins in China and Japan. But none can commit until Max decides. This is the Max Vortex. One signature pulls the entire grid into motion. Ferrari has no room for a third superstar. Mercedes invested in youth, with Antonelli becoming the youngest pole sitter in history. But here is what the paddock is not talking about. The new teams change the calculus. Cadillac arrives with Ferrari power. Audi takes over Sauber. Both need marquee names. If Max walks, he chooses which project gets the ultimate endorsement. The financial ripple effects under the budget cap are staggering. One $60 million salary reshapes multiple team budgets. If Red Bull loses Max, does their title defense collapse? Who benefits most? Every week Max waits is a week. Other drivers cannot plan. Every race the RB22 struggles is a week. McLaren must decide how hard to push. When summer break arrives, the question is who gets left behind. Max Verstappen has 6 races to decide if he still wants to call himself a Formula 1 driver. Miami arrives soon, the next critical data point for a car showing no fundamental improvement. The Bahrain and Saudi Arabia cancellations gave him extra time to sit with his season's reality. Spain, Canada, Austria, Silverstone, and Hungary follow. Each race tests whether the RB22 can be fixed. Red Bull has explored a scenario where Max sits out 2027 while they pay his salary. That option does not reach the table unless both sides have considered it seriously. What no broadcast covered is this: the question is no longer about lap times. It is about motivation. When a 4-time champion must convince himself to try, the math changes. The clause triggers after Hungary. In 6 races, 1 clause and 1 decision, the entire architecture of Formula 1 could change. The clause exists. The trigger is real. The choice belongs to Max alone. Every driver waits. Every team holds its breath. When the lights go out in Hungary, the answer will not come from a press release. It will come from a man who has won everything, staring at a future he never expected to question.